You actually said my name correctly.
Yay!
It's actually Klas Hyllander. Normally in international settings, people will call me Klas Hyllander, which is always nice in one way. So I'll be speaking about a leadership program for men that we run in Sweden. You heard Peter Grönberg from Volvo introduce it slightly before. So the Walk the Talk program, a leadership program for male business leaders on gender equality and diversity, in fact, but we hold gender equality as the lead question that we need to work with here. And really, I'd like to say it's just one of many, many examples of interventions that are engaging men and boys today and that have this quality of being gender transformative, as we say in the lingo of our business. So it's not in any way the only existing program, but it is still quite unusual, I would say, especially in the business setting. So my name is Klas Hyllander, you caught that, and actually I'm an engineer by training. I used to be an engineer at Telia and Ericsson in Sweden and held manager positions. Around 35 years of age, I ran into these ideas of, or the knowledge about men and masculinity and gender equality. And actually it blew my mind completely, because suddenly I started to kind of understand what I've always experienced in my life as a boy. Wondering about why I was scared by other men and boys. If I was scared, it was normally other men and boys that scared me. I'm not saying that women can't be scary, they sure can, of course, but I was lucky enough to have women in my life that were more followed the patterns of giving support and being caring. And when I met men where I grew up I actually grew up in Venezuela, but also in Sweden. I remember one of the men I was scared, or one of the persons I was scared by when I was a kid walking to school was a man called the Running a Fox, because he had a big red beard. He was an alcoholist, and he would always shout at children as we passed by him. So I had many of those experiences, being scared by men. And also being, as a boy, actually being able to identify, I think, women's oppression. I could see the sexism. And I was always wondering, what does that mean to me as, I'm a boy, and I grew up to be a man. How do I deal with that? Because I think it's wrong, but nobody's really talking about it, except that we are a problem. And it was kind of confusing, I think, being a boy and seeing myself as a problem, and not having a conversation about that. It was confusing, really. Well, so when I met those ideas in my 35th year, it blew my mind, and I decided to change my career. So I worked with the NGO movement on these issues. Men for Gender Equality in Sweden is represented here. Louise is the chair over there. I worked there for about 10 years, and now I'm an independent consultant, and among the things I do, I run this program called Walk the Talk. It actually originated from Volvo, as you heard from Peter, and it was the CEO, the group CEO, again, the issue of leadership. The group CEO of Volvo, Leif Johansson, back then, who backed the whole program, understanding that we have to work with the majority culture of the company if we are going to change the gender inequalities. And my partner in working with this nowadays, Louise Ekström, was the mind behind designing this program. Are we there yet? Is this section of the conference? Of course we're not. Peter gave a pretty dire picture of the business life in Sweden. I would say the business sector is one of those sectors that hasn't changed in Sweden in terms of gender equality. Many other sectors have. We have women leaders in the public sector at all levels of leadership, as well as in politics. But when it comes to the private business sector, it's a quite bad situation. And in a way, I would say, I very much like what you said, Mr. from Reykjavik Energy, that we have to put pressure on top CEOs because they're underperforming. They're not doing their job in a way. They're not leading in a way where everybody who works in the company or the potential that you have in the market is being used. I mean, we are asking them to lead sustainable companies, and part of that is social sustainability. And in a way, I would say that companies are externalizing costs onto society. It's very costly for society to have companies that exclude large portions of the population. And you already heard the case, the business case. We know that gender equal companies do better financially. So male business leaders are underperforming. It's not good enough. Whoops. Interesting, I have water on the computer now. I think I'll need some paper, but let's see if it works.
If you were a woman, this would never have happened.
What do we say to that? So, just a few basic ideas. When we bring in the men, the male business leaders in our program, they tend to think about gender like this. This is their initial idea of what gender is, what gender equality is. The word gender is equated to women. Oh, thank you. I think we're fine like this.
Okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's dry enough. I've never had moisture in my computer before. But thank you. So this is how in society in general, but certainly the male business leaders that we have in the program, when we start the program, they think about gender this way. It's about women. It's not about men. And in a way, men are not visible to them, you can say. It's actually the privilege of being invisible. And as you see in this picture, you can easily spot the women. It's like we can see the women, but the majority in the group, the men, kind of in their large numbers, and the men in black, as the previous speaker said, are invisible to many of us and to them. So my point here is really, I would say that this invisibility of men in the discussion about gender not only sustains privilege for men, because it makes us not question men in our position, but it also sustains the invisibility of men's problems that we talked about earlier. It's almost like it's a taboo in society to speak about the weaknesses or the vulnerabilities of men, which I, in my mind, connect to our power position. It kind of sustains the power position as well. So men are part of the equation too, as we know. And one way of just bringing out the men is using this old image that many of you recognize. At least here we see that men are part of the equation, but it's a problematic picture, isn't it? Because it has this old idea that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. You know, kind of really stereotyping, say that all men are the same over here and all women are the same over here. And this is a very problematic idea, actually, which we challenge as well in our program. But I would say that this was maybe the starting point for Volvo, making this step, saying that it's not that the women are the problem. You know, they had tried everything. They were losing female talent. Men that were projected to make a career in Volvo did so. You know, management trainees, they went right up through the hierarchies of the company. But the women with the same competence that were recruited at the same time, they dropped out at about 40 at large rates. At the age of 40, they dropped out of the company. And Volvo had tried women networks, mentors for women leaders, gender knowledge, gender coaches for women, but it didn't work. Then, as I talked to you about before, Leif Johansson and Louise Ekström and a group of people realized we need to think about the majority culture. It seems like the culture at Volvo is excluding to women, and that's the problem. So we need to start engaging men at Volvo, and especially male leaders at Volvo, to change this. So realizing that men and women men don't come from Mars, women don't come from Venus, we live on the same planet, And the philosophy is, of course, that women and men as individuals are more alike each other than different. We can actually do anything. Men can give care, women can lead businesses, women can lead the national football team of Sweden. We can actually interchange all of our roles and ideas that we think are gendered. That's the potential. So rather, as we speak about in the Walk the Talk program, this is a part that comes from the research on men and masculinities that's been done over the past 25, 30 years. Many of you might know it. It's the famous researcher Connell who introduced the concept of masculinities. First of all, that actually there are many ways of being a man, many ways of being of acting in a masculine way. There's not only one. That's one of the misconceptions about men and masculinities. So, but also that masculinities are constructed. So it's not something biological, it's social. That's the same thing as with the norms for femininities. But in a gender unequal society and in a gender unequal company, you will see these hierarchies build up. And the interesting, what I want to point your attention to here is the hierarchy between men, within the group of men. So what Connell showed is that there are power relations between different men. So at the top you will see those men that try to and maybe can sometimes live up to masculinity ideals or norms that are those that give most power in society today. Below those men you'll see men that are followers, that maybe appear to be real men, but maybe don't live up to all the ideals. But we get privilege too. And below that you have men that are subordinated to other men and marginalized. And actually I think here you can start to think about that the problems that we heard, men that have mental health problems, that have high levels of depression, that commit suicide. It's not, you know, the reasons for this. You can see maybe in this, or get an idea from this hierarchy of being subordinated and marginalized within the group of men. Now, just to point out, this is a social construct. Women and men can enter these two triangles as bodies. So females can, of course, assume masculine traits, but will not be able to reach the same levels as men because their body points them to the, you know, you don't come across as a real man. It's built into your body, so you have to work double as hard to get the same pay. Well, so when we introduced the Walk the Talk program, which is for male managers, the whole idea is really to create awareness of men and masculinity, the whole idea of what is masculinity and how do we learn it. And I think it has to do with the idea of if you want to be a good leader, you have to know who you are. How can you lead other people if you don't understand who you are yourself, where you come from, and what shaped you? And if you want to lead a diverse company, we have to start to understand how masculinities creates these types of hierarchies within the companies. And as Peter said, to many of the participants, it's the first time, just like it was for me when I was 35, that anyone speaks about the issues of gender in a way where men relate to how does it work for me in my life and in my leadership. So it's actually a quite, let's say, something that changes a lot for many of the participants. But of course, we need to talk about gender in general and what it's like to be a woman. So we have female speakers coming in, female CEOs talking to the group of men. But it's very much a process. It's not so much about facts. It's more a process of self-reflection and talking to other men. And we teach, you know, how do you interrupt sexism? So if you're at a board meeting or in an all-male setting, in a locker room or in a whatever, and you hear another leader or a man speaking in a sexist way or joking in a sexist way, how do you interrupt that? How do you stop it? How do you identify it? Why is it wrong? Why is it something you should stop? So it's also practical training. Well, so I'm really happy to say that many of our participants come out from this gender training course, masculinity awareness training course, and say it's the best training course that we've ever had in leadership, because finally someone is talking about things that's going on every day in my life that I've never talked about before. And maybe relating a little bit to what Peter said about creativity and productivity. I mean, I think to business leaders, it's quite obvious when you understand how masculinity norms create hierarchies. That's not a very creative environment, just like Peter said. So to give you one example of what a participant said, he said, you know, finally now I understand why, when I've been in high-level meetings with other men in my company, and we have discussions on our work. It seems like to me there's a pattern where all the men are only speaking about how successful they are, and you know, talking about how good we are at things, and how fantastic my department is working. But when we have mixed groups, the dynamics change completely. When we have balanced groups, it seems like we're talking about the problems we need to solve instead. It becomes more open. So the degree of competition, trying to sustain your position in the hierarchy, goes away. So, to learn more about Walk the Talk, please write, and I'll be happy to share more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hyllander.